Hi, this video is going to be on part 2 and part 3 of Unit 4, Activity 3, and we'll focus on interviews and body language. And so if you're in the middle of the page, you'll see part 2, interviews. And we're going to look at two different types of interviews, information interviews and job interviews. And so this whole unit has been about jobs and careers and the different type of communication that you have to do in order to be, successfully enter the career of your choosing. And so you'll see that again with information and job interviews. We're going to focus on how they relate to work and careers. Two terms that we would definitely need to know in order to understand what we mean by interviews is interviewer, so that's the person who is asking the questions, and interviewee, which is the person who's answering the questions. And so in an information interview, you would be the interviewer. And the idea is that you would find somebody who's an expert in their field or in their career, and you would interview them about their job or about what they studied in school so that you can get an understanding of how to get into that career and whether you would like that career or whether you'd like to follow that field of study. And so to find an interviewee, you can certainly do a number of different things here. They give you ideas here. You can call a manager at a company. You can interview a friend or relative or someone that you know that works in the field. So, for example, if you're really interested in becoming a nurse and you have an aunt or a cousin who works as a nurse, you could interview that person and get details about their career and their education so that you can kind of follow a similar path if it sounds interesting to you. They give you some ideas here of questions that you could ask someone who you're interviewing. So these are just sort of template questions. You can certainly ask your own questions based on what you're interested in. But these are questions that can kind of get you started when you're doing an information interview. Some tips here about what you want to do when you conduct an interview. And it says for an information interview, but this can apply to any type of interview. You want to introduce yourself. You want to maintain eye contact. You want to either record the interview or take notes. And you always want to thank the person who you've been speaking to at the ending of the interview. So that's one type of interview, is information interview, where you're just trying to get information about something. The second type of interview is a job interview. And this is maybe when people think of being part of an interview, this might be the number one type of interview they think about. And at some point in almost all of our lives, we have to do job interviews in order to get a certain job or to get into the career that we're looking to get into. And so this just has a little introduction. What is the purpose of a job interview? Why is it important to make a good first impression? How to prepare. So these are all just going to be tips to help you get started preparing for a job interview. And so, for example, what do you do before the interview? What do you do when you arrive for the interview? What do you do during the interview? So these are all just good tips. I would suggest taking notes or copying and pasting these tips. Because in the future, when you do have to go to a job interview, these are excellent ideas to remember. You can also practice your interview skills. If you click on the link here, it's going to take you to a virtual job interview. And what you're going to be asked to do is imagine a job that you would like, and then answer these questions based on that job. So if I open up the virtual interview here, it gives you some instructions here, but then when we start, there'll just be someone here asking questions, and you can type in your answers. And
what are some of your interests?
And it'll go through, I think, about 10 to 12 common job interview questions. And you can type in your answers, and actually there's a way at the end where you can print your answers if you like. And so consider this sort of a practice job interview, and this is a good way of making notes for when you would have to go to a job interview. And it doesn't just work for job interviews, I'd say. Like if you're applying to a university or college program, sometimes there's an interview process as well too, where you have to meet the dean or someone that's in charge of that college program, and they have to decide whether you're going to get into that program or not. So these questions can be helpful in a couple of different ways, and so it might be a good idea to save your answers. Hint, hint, in your assignment for this activity, you're going to have to answer job interview questions as well. So if you've gone through this practice exercise here, it will also help you for the assignment you'll do later on. And so yeah, again, so that's your practice interview here. And then they have some final tips on what to do after you write an interview. For example, you usually want to write an email or a letter to the person that interviewed you and thank them. We're actually going to talk more about writing letters in our next activity in Unit 4, Activity 4. The last topic for this activity is Part 3, Body Language. And so when you're doing an interview, your body language is important. And so this is just going to go over what is body language and explain how body language works. And then they're going to give you two examples of an interview here. One with someone named Allison and a second one with someone named Michelle. And if you go through the body language of Allison and if you go through the body language of Michelle in these two interviews, you'll see lots of different reasons why Allison's body language was poor and why Michelle's body language was very good. And so we want to try to mimic Michelle here when we go to an interview or when we're just generally meeting people for the first time. It's a good idea to use this body language, not the body language that Allison projects. And at the bottom here, we have a little summary of the positive examples of body language. Many of these you would have seen in this paragraph in this interview with Michelle, and then you'll see negative examples of body language, which you'll have seen in this interview with Allison. And so again, just like with the tips for how to do an interview, you might want to make notes or copy and paste these body language tips, because they could come in handy for you just in general life outside of this course when you're meeting people or when you're going to interviews for jobs. And that's about it. You've reached the end of the content here, and you can move on to the assignment here. I will do another video and put it on the assignment page. But if you have any questions about the content, please let me know.